Gentlemen, we have called you together to inform you that we are going to overthrow the United States government.
Do you still think that jet fuel brought down the World Trade Center?
Oh, but they're cold-blooded. See, you're not ready to wake up to the full horror, so you're not going to be able to resist them. Knowing is half the battle. The devil's greatest trick was he didn't exist. So I'm sorry this is so hardcore, but this is the facts. Now, first I thought we would, before we get into all this evidence of the current stuff, Bayer Corps Science, Crop Life America, Human Pesticide Testing Policy. And I first learned about this 6 years ago in a New York Daily News article that's been taken down now, but we have it saved at Infowars.com, where they were taking little black kids, I mean, and others, but mainly blacks, and testing pesticides on foster children until they died. And the little kids would try to escape, one 7-year-old, and they strapped him down and gave him the pesticides and killed him. And the CPS workers had a moment of clarity and came out and said, we're not going to do this, and tattled. They got fired. The killing continues. So there is that report. I can show you a document cam shot of that. And Bayer Corps Science plotted human pesticide testing policy. And because when this came out in 2005, they were killing people with pesticides. They tried to get a law passed or a policy passed that they could do that. And we have links. Just type in foster children pesticide. You'll get all the mainstream news. But they're like, oh, it was kind of not nice to kill them, but they did. Nobody gets in trouble. Okay. Here's another one. This is Associated Press, saved at Infowars.com. It's part of the First Amendment to defend us against tyranny. Feds tested AIDS drugs on foster kids, lethal ones. You know, it's the AIDS drugs mainly killing people. These are like hardcore, basically chemotherapy drugs. Again, this all broke in 2005. The rabbit hole went very, very deep. This is Organic Consumers Association alert, EPA to allow pesticide testing on orphans and mentally handicapped children. Again, that's after they got caught, like when Bush got caught spying without warrants or torturing, which was illegal. He tried to then get it legalized. Remember, that's standard policy, so there's the Associated Press. Here's the Israel Insider we have saved. In my film Endgame, we have local Israeli newscasts. 110,000 children were radiated. Over 40,000 of them died. They gave them different dosages. The U.S. paid for this. They would take the brown-skinned Sephardic, not the Ashkenazi, and radiate them to death, murdering them, many of them on the spot. They'd actually cook them onto the table. And don't worry, I've got, Department of Energy admits, from the 40s through the 80s, now it's all secret, radiating children. They put little babies, foster babies, in these basters and hit them with such high-powered radiation that in some of these reports, they would actually be cooked onto the metal. That's nice government, though. They wouldn't stage 9/11. Everything is fine. And again, Government Employees Union tell EPA don't expose kids to pesticide experiments. And that's peer.org, EPA scientists. You can go read that in press releases. Actually, EPA scientists have come out 3 separate times, 90+% of them, thousands signing doctors, chemists, you name it, saying don't put sodium fluoride in the water. Causes cancer, but you know what? They're not going to stop because they love killing you too much. Here it is, WOAI. We saved this at the time. That's why we save it. It's down now. 2 out of 3 foster children in Texas on psychotropic medication. A doctor in the system here, we played the newscast at the time, went public and said, yeah, I've seen kids come in totally healthy, and within 6 months, they're on 7 drugs. Within a year, they're on anti-convulsion drugs, and then they die. So because they get more money when they make them special needs. And if you're 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you cry for mommy when they take you into a big, dirty facility with all these other kids raping you, 7 times more likely to be sexually abused, Justice Department's own numbers, in CPS care, 7 times more likely to get an STD, 5 times more likely to be generally abused. When you come out, 5 times more likely to end up beginning up in prison. Unless you become a CPS worker. The weird thing is a lot of them become CPS workers because it's part of the pedophile network they're now part of. So when we were exposing this in 2007, and I had medical doctors and others on, people like Dr. Breeding he's a psychologist, were at the state hearings. He said, you need to go dig that up. I was there. There should be an online video. The head of the state board, the head psychiatrist said, yeah, we do have 2/3 of the kids on psychotropics. Suzanne Hupp, representative, you know, she survived the Luby shooting. She said, hey, 2/3 are on these drugs and they're dying from them. And how do you just take little kids and put them on drugs that aren't even approved for people, you know, under the age of 10? And he goes, they come from bad gene pools. A eugenics answer. So let's go to a clip from Endgame. The United States and England are currently testing pesticides and highly toxic experimental drugs on tens of thousands of healthy foster children, many of which die as a result of the experiments. By 2007, more than 20% of the U.S. population were on some type of prescription antidepressant. But in the case of foster children, a sector where the state has total control, at least 2/3 are forced to take a cocktail made up of, on average, 7 psychotropic drugs. Chairman of the Texas Society of Psychiatric Physicians, Joe Burkett, testified before the State House Select Committee hearing on psychotropic drugs in foster care and shocked the public when he said that 2/3 of foster children in Texas had been placed on psychiatric drugs because they were very, very sick from a bad gene pool.
A lot of these kids come from bad gene pools. They don't have stable parents making good decisions. Besides the gene pools, they've then been traumatized by abuse, neglect, and problems, and then they've been traumatized by separation, and all those things predispose to mental illness.
The Western world is now implementing eugenics pre-crime policies. Fetuses are now being pre-screened according to family histories of crime. From Portland, Oregon. When I was in the movie theater and first showed Endgame, people laughed, and then I showed more articles, London Guardian, where they drug the woman to get the baby, and it's drugs that cause brain damage. 3 U.S. states have been doing it for 5 years. Oregon was the first, and now England's doing it. And at birth, they put cameras in many of the homes now of parents in a pre-crime, and if you don't, if you ever do anything wrong, they go throw them in a big dirty dungeon with pedophiles. I'm not kidding. Again, this is what's all going on under everybody's nose. My words cannot describe to you what I've personally seen fighting these people. And I'll be honest, it was so horrific that I had to quit or I would have become violent. I had to quit going and physically looking at them, because when you're in a room with a bunch of them laughing with a crying family for no reason, and the kid's crying and they're getting off on it, and you can tell they're taking the kid off to rape them, let me tell you something. I mean, let me tell you, this, and by the way, if this is freaking you out, it should. This is going on everywhere right now. Over 1 million kids they get. And they always have ads and TV, oh, this was a bad parent beating their kid. There are bad parents, but they're many times more likely to be abused by the system. You understand? Statistically, it's a no-brainer. 5 to 7 times better off getting rid of the CPS entirely. In the old days, if somebody saw somebody really hurt their kid, there were criminal charges. Or in the old days, if your neighbor saw you really hurting your kid, you come over, hey, Bill, you shouldn't be doing that. You got a problem at work. You want to do that? Do that to me. And that's what it's come down to. The state is a bunch of scum. And look, all the literature, they say they got bad gene pools. Eugenics never went away. You know, that's what Hitler did. He got it from the U.S. and England. 35 states, if you made less than a B+ in school, they sterilized you. Endgame, I have copies of the newsreels and the report cards. Have you forgotten all this? See, they don't tell you this on the news, folks. We let our own species do this to us. I don't know what's wrong with you out there, but it's time to get angry. It's time to recognize the enemy, and it's time to come after them in the info war to identify them as the criminal guilds they are. Like I said last week, their genocide against us starts now. We're fighting back. The war has begun. And when they kill us and shut us down and persecute us, it only makes us stronger. We're drawing the enemy out. How can you sit there and worry about your reputation and your career while they're raping kids right now? And those kids are begging for help, just like Kelly Thomas begging for his daddy as a full-grown man as the wolves tortured him to death. None of us are safe until we stand up. What is wrong with you? I know, sodium fluoride, massive brainwashing, it doesn't matter. You still got the human destiny in you. You still got the instincts, and they can override all that right now. Texas foster care investigation. Child as young as 3 are drugged with antipsychotics. Folks, you can't even give these unless it's state-approved to psychotic people because they eat your brain. We got that report. And here's the one that sent me back down the rabbit hole of looking at all this information. 3-year-old CPS are overprescribed psychotic drugs. Overprescribed? They're not even approved in people under 10, antipsychotics. Under 5, they don't care. Hundreds of thousands are on it. Over 2/3, they take little kids, and when you cry, the big fat demons if they don't feel like raping them, which is most of them, they just sit there and warehouse them. And I got articles where they're drowning all the time, being killed, being raped, being sold into sex slavery. CNN reported like 5 years ago, 3,000 plus missing kids in Florida. When they started finding them with their heads chopped off in different countries and in graves, the story just went away. I mean, the big thing is they fly these little kids out and torture them and rape them. And I'm bad because I don't like that? I'm bad because I still got red blood and will face the reality? I'm bad? No, you're bad out there making jokes about this. Let me tell you, those that serve this evil consciously are one thing, and they're going to get theirs. But those of you that think all this is funny, let me tell you, that's why you're so miserable and cursed. Let me tell you, you will be brought to justice one way or another. I know it, okay? I have total certainty. In fact, okay, let's just stop right there. Continuing with other news, CPS warrior Nancy Schaefer gunned down. Associated Press, she'd called me a week before and said, in a few weeks, I'm going to come on your show. I have evidence, she's state senator in Georgia at the time, a few years ago, that they do have lists, and they do have quotas, and they're picking up kids for these rich families. And her and her husband committed suicide with firearms that weekend. Anybody believe that? Got a bridge I am ready to sell you on Pluto. Here is a clip of the late senator clearly murdered by a mafia hit team because she wanted to cut in on their child trafficking operations.
For 4 years, I have been confronted with families struggling to remove their children from the clutches of Child Protective Services. I wrote a scathing report last year on the corruption in Child Protective Services, and an update and copies are out on the table. The Department of Child Protective Services has become a protected empire built on taking children and separating families. This is not to say that there are not those children who do need to be removed from wretched situations and need protection. However, my report is concerned with the children and parents caught up in legal kidnapping. Having worked with probably 300 cases statewide and hundreds across the country, and in nearly every state, I am convinced there is no accountability in Child Protective Services. The Adoption and the Safe Families Act, set in motion first in 1974 by Walter Mondale and later in 1997 by President Bill Clinton, offered cash bonuses to the states for every child they adopted out of foster care. Some counties often offer $4,000 to $6,000 bonus for each child adopted out to strangers, and an additional $2,000 for a special needs child. Employees work to keep the federal dollars flowing. The National Center on Child Abuse and Neglect in 1998 reported that 6 times more children died in foster care than in the general public, and that once removed to official safety, these children are far more likely to suffer abuse, including sexual molestation, than in the general population. Think what that number is today, 10 years later.
She committed suicide with her husband a few weeks after that, and she called me. She said, I want to come on the next week. I've got the proof. This is incredible. Well, they knew you had the proof, honey, but you're in a better place than they're going. That lady was so great. She was really hurting them in Georgia. I mean, she was really exposing them. All the kids they were killing and hurting and drugging, and they went over and they murdered her and her husband, something fierce. If they ever come to my house and kill me and my family, no, it's a lie. Gary Webb sent me a disc, and I wasn't very good at websites. You know, when he got killed, I had InfoWars, but it was a Pulitzer Prize winner. They said, can you make a website with all these documents? I want to put this on, and I never even got around to it. And, that stuff was all public. It was this Pulitzer Prize-winning research. So don't send a hit team to kill me because you think I have some secret dossier. But he had a new book coming out to vindicate himself. And hell, now they grow the opium publicly in Afghanistan. And he had told myself and others, including Silica Still and Ricky Ross, guys have been breaking in his house, you name it, he'd moved. He'd seen special forces types coming off his roof, going right down the drain pipes like in movies. And they came to his house, had him sign a letter that he was going to kill himself, and then shot him twice in the head. It looks like at the end he struggled because they blew his jaw off and then shot him in the back of the head. And within minutes of the announcement, oh, it was suicide. It's always when you know it's staged. Breitbart, he had a heart attack. Minutes after we heard he was at the hospital. Just don't ask questions. about to release the fact that, you know, Obama was meeting with communists and Bill Ayers and others, and you're dead. We're so high profile they haven't killed me yet. But I mean, it's like they're torturing kids everywhere. How am I supposed to be afraid of being killed? I mean, it's like no brainer.